Welcome to the Power Curve. I'm Holly Scott. In our podcast, I have the pleasure of chatting with accomplished industry executives regarding their career path with the idea of empowering you, our audience, as you work along your own career trajectory. Today, I am pleased to have Brittany Bradrick, the CFO and COO of ViaCyte, with me today. Hello, Brittany.
Good morning.
Yes, no, this is great. ViaCyte is a biotech company focused on transforming diabetes. Is that correct?
Yes, we're using stem cells to differentiate them into pancreatic islet cells to try to create a functional cure for diabetes.
That's mind blowing. That is mind blowing, and that's the holy grail, right? There really isn't a cure to date. There's chronic and lifestyle management, and it's an enormous population. So I must ask, just to jump right in. So you moved from Boston to San Diego. Was the disease state, the area of focus, part of that draw? Share with us a little bit about that move.
Yeah, so Holly, I think as I did investment banking for 10 years and then I moved to the corporate side, and that entire time's been in the diabetes field. So first I worked at Abbott where we worked on a continuous glucose monitor. And then I moved to Insulet and we were working there on a closed loop system, which the company hopefully will get approved this year. And that's done tremendous things for patients to really get them in control. It's allowed people to have the night back. But when I had this opportunity to really go that step further, right, and try to help create a functional cure, having that impact was so appealing. And so I jumped at the chance to both come to this company as well as, kind of broaden my role in the company as well.
That's incredible, and it took a lot of strength and gumption to do this, especially over the last 12 months in the middle of a pandemic and a cross-country move and relocation, you and your family. So
Yeah,
how was that experience?
it's really kind of been surreal. I mean, I think COVID is, people still find a way to get things done. Finding an apartment more virtually was interesting to live in kind of temporarily, and then buying a house also kind of, with minimal touch points is it's just a new world, and how people are going about things are different. But movers were still moving, apartments were still available, so I was able to do that. So we had kind of the trip out here, and then we've kind of been hunkered down since then.
Did you interview while in quarantine? Did you interview virtually through your process?
Yeah, I had met so the previous CEO who has since retired. I had known from my investment banking days, and I think I met the executive chairman like the week before shutdown happened. So I was able to meet two important people in person. Everyone else was virtual. So it is also interesting to interview virtually and then show up at a company that you've never been to with people that you've never met. So I except virtually. So it's interesting because then when you meet them in person, people are shorter than you thought or taller than you thought or
It's true. There's been a lot of talk about this, and especially developing strong processes virtually, interview processes. Last year, we had 68% of our hires were made sight unseen, and that was
wow.
from board, C-suite, VP, director, and individual contributor. You expect it in software, and you expect it in some engineering pockets, but this is unlike anything I had ever seen before. In your process specifically, I have to ask, because I know that this is a curiosity point. Did you find that there were surprises once you started working with people that you hadn't met in real life? Were there things that were like, oh man, I wish I had had more time with them in the beginning? Anything that we could have done differently to make that process better for you, especially if it's being conducted virtually?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'd never seen the building. So that was a bit of good or bad, right? It was just a surprise because you hadn't seen the building. And then some people I wish I would have maybe spent a little bit more time with. I think to your point, the world changed during COVID and people found ways to adapt. And in some ways, that process is still being worked out. And so I think that because you're interviewing completely virtually, spending maybe a little bit more time with people or, circling back probably even more so than you did before, could help the process. So I think maybe the process at the end of the day takes a little bit longer, but you're able to feel more intimate, I guess, more comfortable with those individuals. Having said that, I also know that the pace of life science is so fast at the moment and people are hiring so quickly. So that's in contrast to what I just said. So I think it's kind of individualized to the company and the process too.
Yeah, no, we're seeing that too. We're seeing a harder look at the processes and hiring, and you now in your level in the organization as you continue to expand, there'll likely be many things that will continue remote, right? Or continue in a virtual setting, whether it be a meeting, continued meetings for the next 12 months or for beyond that. So we're looking at cultural suggestions, and we're looking at ways and process for people to do a better job of diligence on both sides. In my context, it's mainly interviews, but we're also seeing it in business discussions, in investor discussions, in diligence discussions on potential fundraising conversations and so forth. So yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing that things are getting done, and now that you're there, we can look at optimizing that process, right? Where what you did well, and that's why I asked the question, what went well, what could we have done differently, and perhaps we wrap in more diligence, more conversations. It may feel like more time because you're on more Zooms, but the reality is if you had to get on a plane and fly across the country another time or wait for the availability of all 5 people you're going to meet on site, it would be pushed out a few weeks anyway. So it's a trade-off, right? So anyway, very, very interesting. And while we're talking a little bit about ViaCyte, I know you were brought in to lead finance. Share with us a little more about the operational responsibility that you've recently taken on.
Yeah, so I think I'd been here about a month and a half when the CEO retired. So the executive chairman and myself have really been acting as interim CEO until we hired a CEO whom just started 2 weeks ago. And so it's been a tremendous opportunity to kind of spread my wings and do a lot more than I was thinking of doing, that I was anticipating doing, but have really enjoyed. And so now kind of all the admin functions have folded under me. So legal, HR, facilities, corporate communications, BD, and of course, finance and accounting. So we are about 100 people and growing pretty fast. We have 2 programs in the clinic, soon to be 3. So really just trying to your point, as a small company, we have to think about how we build the company, how we build the culture, given that a lot of this is virtual. And, we are moving from really a research organization to a development organization, and that requires different capabilities. And how do we start to think about organizational design and capability assessment, because those things don't happen overnight. And so, I'm kind of leading a lot of that charge.
Fantastic experience. And
yeah, it's tremendous.
Well, and part of the reason that I was happy to have you as a guest is your this first time bring it on attitude. I haven't done this before, but sure, I'm willing to step up to bat. That's a common theme for you. So yeah. As I think about our audience and people who aspire to the C-suite and coming from a financial background, let's go back to the beginnings. What are some of the early perhaps lessons that were instilled in you, whether it was family or experiences, as a young adult, as a teen even, things that you remember that if you were to pass along to someone earlier in their career or even younger than that as they're thinking about career, what are some of the memories or some of the prints that you have from experience that you think were valuable?
I mean, I think my fundamental core is wanting to make an impact, tenacity, and just doing the work, right? I guess, so I grew up in the Midwest, didn't have a lot of money growing up, and, making an impact is what drives me. And so continuing to look for places where I personally can have a bigger impact, as well as the company that I'm working for having an impact, is something that I have continued to strive for. I think all of us really, if you're not growing and learning, you're dying. So you have to be reaching for some further bar. I've heard the word no a lot. But I think that's good, right? I mean, I think you learn the most from your mistakes, and having grit and tenacity is really kind of what has served me well. And then I think at the end of the day, just, doing really good work. And, even if things don't go well, feeling good about what you did at the end of the day is really what matters. And so those are the things that I think have kind of been the theme for me.
Yeah, the ability to understand that no is not personal, right? Or no is not it's not a qualifier. It's a data point, and it's perhaps less than optimal outcome that we have to work around in some way. That's a skill. I know it took me for a long time to learn, when it was no, it was personal. And it was very difficult in my younger days to realize that was a growth step, and the emotional unwinding and building and allowing it to be a badge of courage moving forward. And I know with my kids, they're in middle school. I try to implement that in them now, is like, go out, let people tell you no, learn, get beaten up a little bit. And well, you were the only girl in the family, right? Didn't you have brothers?
Yes, I have the variety pack of brothers. So I have a half brother, a step brother, and a real brother. And I was, I'm the oldest, and I think that, what they say about oldest children is probably true as well. I grew up in a single parent household, so kind of took on a lot of responsibilities pretty early as well. And I think, to your point, trying to instill that in our children who have more opportunity than we had, right? I think about, if I had all the opportunities, would I be the person I am today? And so, I consider it my job as a parent to make it a little harder, on my son, because he needs to develop that too, right?
That's right.
And also just a little bit of the, gumption. So, when I was first interviewing in investment banking, I remember one interview that I had where the person was like, I don't think you can hack it in this job. And, touche. Okay, great. That was laying down the gauntlet for me. And I think those kind of things can spur you too.
So when you heard that, your knee-jerk reaction in that moment was what?
Words that I can't say. I was 2 words, and then I will show you, right? And of course, I've never talked to that guy after this interview.
Sure.
But, it was my quest then, right, to do well in that industry.
Right. You took it, you owned that, and you said, I will show you.
Yeah.
And you did. Yeah. So your early days in investment banking, you started in finance, right? And first role, Tell us a bit about that experience in investment banking, especially when you were there. You were one of the few females, if I remember you sharing with me. What was that experience like, and what empowered you from that experience that you took with you to become a leader downrange?
Investment banking is a wonderful industry. It's a wonderful career. It's a wonderful way to start, I think. You meet with so many different companies. And so you're learning a lot across an industry. And that's one of the things I really miss about that, is feeling like you're at the pulse of that industry. And I'm sure you feel that way, right? When you're meeting with so many companies, you pick up little bits and pieces to where you really feel like a subject matter expert in that area. In banking, you're helping them to make strategic decisions. You're typically dealing with the board and kind of the top of the house, and I loved that. But it's not for the faint of heart, right? It was a lot of hours and a lot of work. But just like we were saying, those are the experiences that make you. And so that experience, I wouldn't change for the world, and enabled me to move on. And I think, I did that for 10 years. And so it wasn't until, much later in my investment banking career that I really had the desire to leave to go to a company. I think, as often is the case in service businesses, right? You want to be a part of growing something rather than advising somebody at some point. And so it was tremendous. I missed JP Morgan in person this year because, running into people that you helped advise long ago is just one of my favorite things.
Oh my goodness, I bet. Yeah, I think we all missed JP Morgan this year. That's one that I do hope can return to some sort of normalcy, with more meeting space, please.
Yes. I don't know where that would get created.
Yeah, maybe we need to have it in Montana or something instead. Did you develop any early mentors along the way within investment banking? I'm curious if you had someone who was perhaps a mentor, a Sherpa of sorts, that said, hey, you've been doing this for a while. Maybe it's time to think about an operating company, or if this was something that you saw, or how did that come about?
I have had a lot of people that have influenced me that I've worked with or for throughout my career. And a couple that maybe touch on being mentors, but I've never really had one mentor that was kind of throughout my career. And certainly in banking, no one suggested that I leave to go to an operating company. I think it's more just been kind of internal drive. And, I think that you have to believe in your own worth. You have to kind of check in with yourself, goals that you set for yourself 5 years ago or a year ago, everything is a course correction, right? At continual times. And so what is serving you now? What is not serving you now? And how do I move to the next step? Is kind of something I've always thought about. And really what was one of the impetuses for my move to the operating side, besides the number of flights that I took, was really kind of about, wanting to serve the companies in a different way than I was in banking.
And it's allowed you to. And that's what's, I think, really interesting about your background is you have always stepped for challenge. It's never been about what they're going to call you, or titles or direct reports or any of those things. They come anyway. They do. And this is, I chat with so many people, especially in mid-career stage, that are concerned about taking steps that are perceived sideways or not the right direction. And it's like, as long as you are growing personally, professionally, keep your eye on the ball. That is number one. If you're growing and you're becoming that is your value. That's the value that you bring to any future organization. And if you're broad and deep in knowledge, that's only going to make you more marketable. If a company or a person is potentially hung up on hiring you because of a title, they're not going to be of interest anyway. it's just simply it's not going to be of interest. So you've grown. When you became a leader, when you started really influencing and leading other people, were there any instances that you can recall where maybe the outcome wasn't as ideal as it could have been, or something that perhaps surprised you, and you had to think, wow, I haven't been here before, especially as a leader. Here I am. Not only is it me, it's a team I have to be concerned about. Anything that comes to mind that you went through, and perhaps how you got through it?
I mean, most recently when the CEO retired, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the most recent example. So here, with some people that most of whom I haven't met personally, a team that now I have to help lead, right? And how do we pull them together in the face of kind of change? And, change is a constant, and not everybody is comfortable with change. And I think that is something that comes both over time, but also having confidence in yourself. So you talked about, potentially taking lateral moves, and particularly if you're trying to change direction, I think that's important. But I think just the more that you understand something, the more you become a subject matter expert on an area, that enables you to have the confidence to really be able to lead others and feel comfortable kind of in your own skin. But I'd also say that, even if you don't have reports, you can be a leader, right? The definition of a leader is not necessarily the person at the top of the house. The definition of a leader is, inspiring people that work with you, and, getting the best out of them, right? I consider it my job as a leader to hire really smart people and then get out of their way so that they can do their job, right? My role is to guide them and kind of course correct as we go, so that we all get better and we all learn. And, I think that too often people talk about leaders as being a certain title, but everybody can be a leader.
That is so true. That is so true. And I'll add on that most of our clients, I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say all of my clients don't really care as much as we expect them to about the number of direct reports that people have had. That is the most important thing when they choose a leader, is what they've been able to accomplish and how they've been able to accomplish it. So now, of course, is there a difference between a startup leader and a mid-cap or corporate leader? Yes. Putting that aside, though, if we're in the same ballpark, it's not a matter of, oh, how big was their team? Well, they're qualified because they had 8 people instead of 50 people, or vice versa. It really is about, what were they able to get done? How did they engage their team? What was their style? What were their deliverables? What were they able to accomplish? What value did they bring the organization that made a difference? So if we can think of ourselves individually as a product or service that is marketed in the world along your career path, and you think about what value or service you're bringing to your organization, it really doesn't matter that little quantity piece of, oh, I had these many direct reports, or I did not have these many direct reports. Stop hanging your hat on that. It's not all about that. It's about what you were able to do. And perfect example, you go into a new organization, you've been there for a couple months, all of a sudden they say, hey, would you like to take on this operational responsibility? Which, frankly, in most financial professionals and their typical persona, that's like Greek, right? That's a totally different language. Give me facilities, give me operations, give me HR, give me all of these things. So you did that. You when you were thinking about that decision that you were going to step up and do it, was there a level of uncertainty? Did you have a little bit of fear that you were wrestling with?
Sure. I mean, but I feel like isn't there a saying you should do something every day that makes you a little scared? I didn't really have time to think about it. But like you said, I don't know that I have, I was about to say, I don't know that I've ever shied away from things that are scary. I actually would say I've gone towards things that are scary to me, because I don't want them to be scary and I want to accomplish them, right? I'm scared of heights, but I've been skydiving, I've been bungee jumping, right? I refuse to let something hold me back just because it's scary. So I think that taking on more responsibility, seeing opportunities when they come, um, being nice to everyone around you, right? When you talk about leading, it's leading up and leading down, right? And making sure that you're presenting yourself and kind of your your brand, I guess, right? Is what you create, and it's yours to do that. And so, I think that that is who you become. And so, seizing on those opportunities when they're there is what makes you a better leader and helps you grow.
Yeah, and I don't want to minimize the impact that you make on others. It's one thing to impact a company with your successes along the way, but when it really comes down to it, people hire people, investors hire people, and investors hire the leaders. The C-suite is made up of individuals that the investors have confidence in, that they're going to do the job. They believe are authentic about what their character is, and they've made a difference, a positive difference on others in their wake to get there. So there's the company outcomes, there's revenue outcomes, there's the people, though, the people you touch and produce. And I know we've talked about this in terms of reflecting back, and being able to mentor others now, giving back and seeing them succeed, and seeing the people at JP Morgan that you sat with, and now they've gone on to be strong business people in the industry, and successful. That's there's no feeling like it, right?
No, I mean, it's amazing. I really, and in the last year or two, gosh, I feel like I've just been so humbled to have so many people that I've worked with, like people I didn't even think remembered me, right? Like have called and said, "What are you doing? I'd love to come work for you," or "Could I be a reference?" Or, like, I just think that, to your point about leaving awake, you're leaving awake regardless. And so make sure it's a good one that you're leaving. And really kind of seeing people grow and thrive is so gratifying. And so, like I said, that's part of being a leader. And I hope to be able to help the folks that work for me, with me, and other people that I touch, right? I do a lot of kind of networking calls with people that are seeking career advice as well.
Paying it forward. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I know we're tipped on time, but I am very curious. Trends in medtech. What are you most excited about industry-wise that you're following? Obviously, diabetes. You got a big one right there. Anything else
Yeah.
that's piquing your interest that's that you're passionate about in the industry?
It is such a tremendous time, I think, in the industry in so many respects. I mean, again, kind of back to COVID, I think COVID probably accelerated digital health by probably 10 years. Now, when COVID subsides, I'm sure that will retrench a little bit, but it won't go back to what it was previously. I think that the kind of incentives between the payer, the physician, and the patient are much more aligned now. So I think that industry will forever be changed. I think digital surgery is like, I know you guys are very deep in that, but a very hot wave. And then I think that the area that I'm in, kind of, cell therapy, gene therapy, is also really just coming into the forefront right now.
I'm excited about the cell therapy area. I am. I'm excited about all of the above, but that area in particular, I think has more potential than any of us can imagine right now, except of course the intelligent people that are in the labs figuring it out. But wow, on every disease state, there's so much potential. It's incredible.
Yeah, we're exploring other disease states now too, because we have these, stem cells that could really become any organ of the body. So it's just tremendous potential.
That's fantastic. Well, Brittany, I knew you'd be excellent. Thank you for joining me. I'm so glad to see you again, and I miss you in
Great to see
Massachusetts,
you.
but I'll be out there, and we'll have to catch up for sure. And
I love that.
yeah, no, it was great. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Power Curve. See you next time.